Thank you for tuning into Inflection's crowdsourced recap. This session was all about building readiness together through learning walks. Keep watching for key insights presented by Kate Barker, a co-pilot with Inflection's coaching program, and team member Alexa Ashiel, a project manager at Inflection.
We know that just research shows that when our feedback is timely, when it is accurate, and you have evidence for that accuracy, and it also has a component of being actionable. If you include those three very, very important components, you're halfway there. So I know we live such busy lives, but having it be timely, having those goals written for ourselves that we're going to turn around feedback with, I would say within 24 hours, if not 48 hours, is critical. Number two, accurate. Being really thinking about when you are collecting that data, how are you making sure that it is accurate, that you're getting examples, that you have that. If that teacher is saying, well, why did I get this particular rating? You have that evidence. And then number three is actionable. Our feedback should be for educator growth. Whatever position you're in, it should be all about the growth. So having and building examples of here you are, and we're going to move you. We're going to move you, regardless if you are an exemplary teacher. Everyone can grow. So what are something actionable? And I'm going to show you how, if you can't think of anything, which has been, I've worked with some outstanding educators, and sometimes they are so good that it's really difficult to figure out, gosh, what advice am I going to give them? How am I going to help them grow? I'm going to show you a way that some really easy tools in order to do that. But it goes back to the next conversation, the next observation. If it's actionable, if it's something we can see, then that's something you're going to look for. That's something you're going to give feedback on. So think about throughout the presentation and your journey with feedback, how do we make it actionable? How do we make it accurate? And how do we make it timely? So here are a few questions to ponder. So when I think about what are those roadblocks, what are the barriers to giving feedback? And some of these questions may answer that. So just jot down on a little piece of paper, just even think to yourself, after an observation, how long does it take you to write up feedback? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour, hour? How many minutes? After a walkthrough, how long does it take you to connect that feedback to the teaching standards, to the teacher standards? These are not the academic standards. These are the teaching standards. Like, for example, in our district, we use the Danielson framework. Other districts use the 5Ds, 3Ds, or 4Ds. Others of you have different evaluation teacher standards. So how are you using those to match that evidence and that feedback that you collect to where are they on the rubric? How are they rating with the teaching standards? And then finally, ask yourself the question, how is that feedback connected to either your district goals or your school goals? So we always had goals that we were working on as a building, whether that be ELD strategies, working with our English language learners. Perhaps it was culturally responsive strategies. Perhaps it was DOK levels and increasing that rigor. Maybe at the school level, you're really working on engagement, number of opportunities to respond. But how long does it take you to connect? Okay, how does this particular 10-minute walkthrough, 60-minute observation, how much time does it take for you to connect all of those pieces? It really depends on how in depth that you are going, but it definitely takes time. And if you're anything like me, I had a school of 500 to 600 students, which meant 30 to 40 staff members, where I did walkthroughs with for everyone multiple times during the school year. That can really, really add up. Okay, so thinking about what you can prioritize, because there is so much. We just described a lot of different things that we should be considering during our learning walks. So how do you prioritize? And I think that these are four critical components that we should be considering before we walk in. And we really need to get away from giving feedback on our observations and our learning walks because we have to. So being really transparent with your staff, or if you're giving feedback to a student, to your students or teachers, being really transparent. What is my role? Because my role as a principal may be very different than Cynthia's role as an instructional coach. And so before you are in those classrooms giving feedback, before you are sitting down with a staff member or a student giving feedback, pausing and describing the why. What is my role? What is my why? And I would always go back to my why is for growth, whether that be teacher growth, principal growth, student growth. Why are we in there? We're there to give feedback so you can grow. And now, for some leaders, it's evaluative. Instructional coaches, obviously, probably not evaluative. But when you're thinking about what's the most important things, it's not just giving feedback on a whim. And I think that this is a big mistake that a lot of people do, is that they just kind of arbitrarily like check boxes and it's on a whim. It's not, excuse me, it's not connected to anything. And so here are four different things that I feel like are really important to connect it to, which I've mentioned a few of them. So the first one are, what are your academic standards? So are they talking, what everyone should be grounding their lessons on academic standards? So what is the standard that the teacher is in teaching? And if it's not obvious, if it's not listed in a learning intention, if it's not on a piece on a worksheet at the top of the page, don't be afraid to ask, like, what was your learning intention, even after the fact, or even during. You don't want to interrupt a teacher teaching, but even asking the students, like, what are you learning today? What's the intention of that learning? So the first one is, how are you tying it to that academic standard? The next thing, which we've talked about, is what are your school's priority or academic standards? So our priorities, we went back to our school improvement plan, and feedback loops are a great way to see if your school improvement plan is working. So maybe it is number of engagement, number of opportunities to respond. Maybe it is higher level discussion questions using the 4 DOK levels. So whatever they are, you're including that. How are you giving feedback on that particular school or district priority? The other thing is, what are the possible teacher goals? So that can be formalized, like their student learning and growth goals or their professional goals that they create at the beginning of the year with their principals. Or it could just be something that you ask ahead of time. What's something you really want me to pay attention to? And it might be, I'd like for you to just tally mark, am I calling on more boys and girls? Am I calling to the front of the class or the back of the class? What is my pathway for teaching? Am I just teaching in one area? Am I making sure that I'm not lecturing more than 10 minutes without some sort of an engagement activity? And then the other are, what are those teacher standards? What do you have focused teacher standards that you're working on? Is it Danielson? And is it setting instructional outcomes? And we're going to have learning targets posted on our boards. And we're going through those with our students at least twice during a lesson. So whatever it is, just jot it down. Be really transparent with your community. These are the things I will be looking for. These are the things that I will be giving you feedback on. So it is not a gotcha. It is not a ha ha ha, yep, you blew that one. It's more of a these are expectations. This is and it's accountability. This is I want to praise you. I want to celebrate with you. I want to appreciate that you are really implementing what our goals are embedded into that classroom structure. Next slide. So after answering all of those questions and jotting down, gosh, these are my teaching standards, these are my academic standards, these are my district and school goals, then you're thinking, I wonder how am I going to collect my evidence? And friends, there is no right way. There is no one way. I've done it differently every single year of my 34 years in education. So it is what makes the most sense in being able to give that meaningful feedback. It does not matter if you are somebody who writes notes on a yellow pad or takes notes verbatim on a computer or uses your phone to collect tally marks. Or you have, let's say, a Mosaic app that collects data on particular components of a lesson. It really doesn't matter how you are collecting the data. It's what is the data that you are collecting. So some of the questions to consider is when I am collecting that evidence, when I'm collecting that information, will it give me enough information and a meaningful information that I can give at feedback that will lead to growth? That's the number one question. And if the answer is yes, you're good. And I'll also say, you can collect a lot of information in 5 minutes. And I know that some observations, we really do need to start at the beginning and go to the end to see the whole scope of the lesson. But you don't have to do that every time. And that's the beauty of how I would define a walkthrough, is that you're popping in. You're getting a snippet of that pie. You're giving a little slice of that pie that you can instantly give that feedback on. So think about those questions, like when you are gathering the data, is it going to give you enough to give that meaningful feedback? So let's explore the 5 ways to collect feedback. So using that walkthrough tool, I'm a huge fan of Google Forms. So that, and again, I can just bring in my laptop and very easily just type. It can be anything around what engagement strategies are you using, what avid strategies are you using, and then tie in those district and school goals. For example, am I using the district adopted curriculum? Am I using those avid strategies? Am I being culturally responsive to my students? So you can very much tailor. I love a Google form because you can send it instantly. So it's not that hanging over your head. You can, and it also gives you a running record of who you've seen, and you can even download a spreadsheet. So you can tally up all the different forms and find some commonalities and trends about how it may influence your professional learning for the whole group. So when we're looking for those observable indicators, I cannot say that 5 times fast, so define what might be the teacher actions and then what might be the student response. So it's marrying those two. What is the teacher doing, saying, requesting, setting up? How are they eliciting then an action from the student? And I always think of like a little telephone or some sort of a visual where the teacher is in charge of the content, and the string between the teacher and the student is what are the instructional strategies that are going to transfer the content to the learner. And because I don't know about you, but when I was in college, you went for 50 minutes, an hour and a half, and somebody just talked to you. There was no engagement. Optimal learning didn't happen because there weren't the engagement strategies that connected the content with the learner. Because our ultimate goal is, did we get through the content, but is there learning occurring? So thinking about very specifically, what did the teacher do and how are we seeing the learning showing up with students? The other thing, you can just do a simple tally check mark. I've collected beautiful data around so many different things just by a checklist, just by check, 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 check. And then you're able to say, you asked 10 questions, 9 of them were in DOK1. What can we do to grow that practice? So check marks are great. They're absolutely fine. Next. I'm a big verbatim girl. And now we have all kinds of AI tools where you can just go in and press a button and it'll give you a verbatim. Or back in the old days, I would just, type, 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 type as fast as I can, as fast as I can. And then I would take that verbatim and then I would pull and code and pull out different teaching standards and goals that we were working on. I'm going to show you an easier way tonight about how to do that. And then finally, just really thinking about that teacher to student interaction. So really noting how, back to that, it's really tied to the first one. How does the teacher's action relate to student interaction, student engagement? And how I always work this in every presentation I give. Remember, engagement equals doing. Engagement is not compliance. So even if you all may be very compliant, you're sitting very quietly, that's because you're on mute. But if you're in a classroom and the students are quiet and they have their hands, neatly in their laps, that's compliance. That is not engagement. How are we engaging? How can we observe the students' actionable, how can we collect actionable feedback on what they are doing with the content? So you may be thinking, all right, yeah, but Kate, I have a to-do list of like 100 things, and you want me to tie in all of this stuff. I get it. I get it. I did that. I totally feel you, but I'm going to show you a really, really cool tool on how to use ChatGPT, free app. It has changed my life. I use it every single day. How to create meaningful feedback in minutes. So here's the prompt. This is what I try to start with is provide my third grade teacher, my science teacher, my chemistry teacher, my kindergarten teacher with feedback based on the following information. And we pasted in that the prompts, then I pasted in that verbatim, and then I just push send. And what you'll see in ChatGPT is a beautiful display of feedback that breaks it down into those different sections, what the feedback is. So what are the strengths observed? Under 1C, setting instructional outcomes. Under 2D, managing class, or 2C, managing classroom procedures, or 3B, using question and discussion techniques. So from my verbatim, it is given feedback on what I've asked it to do. The other thing that I love about ChatGPT is if you are working on a particular standard or you do see some growth opportunities, you can just take that particular area and say, do you have any articles? Do you have any webinars? Do you have any other resources? Do you have any YouTube videos that the teacher can use in order to go more in depth around engagement, that can go more in depth around precision partnering? You can also, based on this information that I just put in on the Danielson framework, where would you put this person on a rubric? And it will spit out, I think this person is a level 2. I would always ask it, and why? Because at the end of the day, when you're giving feedback, you want to be able to give your particular teacher the why.
Kate, if I could chime in here, one thing that I think is really great about these technological advances is the fact that it can quickly find resources for teachers. And I really like that you brought up that point because while I was in the classroom, we didn't have ChatGPT yet. Like that didn't come around until like 2020, 2021. And I was teaching a little bit before that. And we would get feedback, but I think I would have really loved like, oh, and here's this article, or here is this YouTube video, or here is this XYZ to help you support your practice, especially when I was a newer teacher, because yeah, I would go back to school and there would be the theories and the academic, but sometimes it is very difficult to marry what you're learning in theory to what it is in practice, because theory is not practice. And so having that in between of like a practical strategy that I don't feel like I have to come up with off the top of my head to differentiate better, or rely on a mentor who is telling me what's best for them, but that might not be what's best for me, I think is really, really, really cool and helpful, because I believe Martine said it, just like you overthink, your teachers probably overthink too. And they're like, well, I don't know what to do. I don't have a first step. And sometimes the barrier to improvement is not having the first step. And I can't move forward if I can't see how to move forward. And if you have something that can provide you with those strategies to do it, man, I think that is really cool. So I love that you included that into the presentation.
So, in thinking about Learning Walk and the insights that drive improvements and in growth for collaboration empowerment, we're going to go through a couple of things. First thing, share your general feedback with your community. Was working with a principal. I know this is teeny tiny, but what we did with her walkthrough form is we collected those school priorities, those district priorities, and she would do her quick 10-minute walkthroughs each week. And then in her newsletter, she would post, for example, the first one is there evidence that students were informed of the lesson's learning intentions? So, and then she had just checkoffs. So was it posted? Did the teacher talk about it? Did they assess their learning using the learning intention? She took data points, and then in her newsletter, she shares the chart. She shares how many different observations that I do of pair shares, how many choral responses, how many written responses, how many small group, how many whiteboards. She takes that tally and shares it with her staff. When you share data like this, you are sharing with them what is important to your learning community. You are showing that that school improvement plan that we put in 60 hours on is a living, breathing document that we are collecting evidence. That when I ask you what are the most bang for your buck strategies, and you say, listen, we're really going to focus on learning intentions, and that's the last I hear of it, I mean, it's not going to go anywhere. But if I'm publishing every week or even once a month, friends, that what are the things that I'm looking for, it really brings in that accountability structure. And it is, you are going to see growth go through the roof when you are building in these accountability structures. And that's why our feedback needs to be more than 2 times a year in a classroom. It needs to be, and it does not need to be 60 minutes. It needs to be 5 to 10 minutes. And you will have staff that will say, but you didn't see it. I really was doing it. Fantastic. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know. You have gotten to them that they know that it's important, and that we're going to have that equity between classrooms, because every classroom is going to be posting learning intentions. Every classroom is not going to lecture any more than 10 minutes without an engagement activity. It provides equity between your grade levels, between your content areas, and it catapults that cruise ship into creating that overall efficacy in student learning.
Thanks for watching. For more resources on learning walks, visit portico.inflection.org and be sure to keep an eye out for our next crowdsource.